Often society focuses so much on birth that we often forget about the sacred healing time postpartum that honors postpartum bodies and includes your sexuality. I remember when I was pregnant as a young woman with my first son, I focused all my energy and attention on how this growing baby inside of me was getting bigger and bigger and thinking, how is it going to come out? But I totally forgot to prepare for my recovery, for intimacy, and honoring my post-birth body. So today, my guest is joining us from New Zealand to share her wisdom about the internal pelvic work after birth and offering her great insights to resuming lovemaking after birth. Hi, I'm Deborah Pascali Bonaro, founder and director of Orgasmic Birth and host of the Orgasmic Birth podcast. My guest today is Claire Eccleston. She's a mama and a grandmother, experienced home birth midwife, and midwifery educator. Claire is a spinning babies approved trainer, sharing the physiology before force approach around the world. Claire is passionate about the ancient arts of birth support, and she began her journey with birth from a bodywork approach. She's now a stream, and I have to say I didn't know what this was, so I'm going to say it out for all of you too. A scar tissue remediation, education, and management practitioner, working mostly with the pelvis and post-birth bodies, and also a craniosacral therapist. Claire's work is moving into the realms of sexuality and birth and where they meet. She works with individuals and couples face-to-face and online. Claire offers some really beautiful online courses too. I'll say a few, but she'll tell you more about them at the end. Home Suite, Building Confidence in Home Birth, Holy Ground Blossoming for pregnancy, and Holy Ground Harvest for post-birth. Both have gentle, practical support for the preparation and healing of vaginas for birth. Claire is a wild dancer who exhilarates in the beauty, the messiness, and the power of her wild woman body. Welcome, Claire. I'm just so honored to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And I have to say, we asked what would be the title for today. And for those of you that are like, oh, I'm wondering what we're talking about, you're going to talk to us of, oh, baby, lovemaking after birth. But before you get into that, you wrote to me that your mother was a midwife, and that always touches my heart, how that passes down. And you were drawn to the mystery and practicality of birth, the power of the unexpected, and how you're curious about why there's so much silence around women's vaginas before and after birth, silence around the power and the capacity of our sexuality and the capacity of our bodies and sexuality to connect us to the reverence of life. I'm so touched by your words that you wrote. Can you talk more about this?
Well, I suppose I can talk from my own body, and I know, to acknowledge the work of Jane Harwick Collins, and that, our women's bodies, or with bodies with vulvas, bodies with wombs, offer us these rites of passage, our menarche, our lovemaking, our birth, how we were born. And I know when I gave birth, I felt like initiated into the volcanic force of life, like a volcanic force of life was moving through me. And I felt so much power. And then within my sexuality, within my womb, I feel so much power, and so much power in my capacity for pleasure. And I think when we look at how much industry, how much money, how much shame, how much effort is extended into silencing women from their power. I mean, if that much energy is extended, like if you look at the beauty industry, or if you look at feminine hygiene products, or how we're meant to dress, if that much energy is extended into separating us from our power, I figure there's a lot of power there that's held. We've got a lot of power to access through the portal of our bodies and through our reproductive capacity, but more than that, through the capacity of our pleasure, through our pelvises, through our wombs, through our vulvas. So I feel like, wake up, that message for everyone, wake up, it's there, it's so good. You can access it. And even if it's a whisper, what are the ways that we find our way back to and away from our bodies as burdens or our bodies as shameful? And what's the pathway back to my body is this really powerful conduit for life force, for pleasure, for potency. My body is divinity, is flesh, as solidness.
So beautiful. I love how you express that. And I love how you say, you're bringing that birth and sexuality together. And I share that with you, right? So often, as you say, there's been so much to put people down and not allow women to step into their full power and not to make that connection between sexuality and birth. So what are some of the ways that you bring that together or you guide some of your clients?
Yeah, so if we look at perhaps birthing first and then postnatal, I think it's so curious that if someone is planning a vaginal birth, the vagina then is quite a big part of the birth. Like if you're planning a vaginal birth, the baby's going to come out your vagina. Your vagina has a role to play. And yet I see so little discussion around how do we support and prepare physically? How do we prepare and be in connection with our vulvas, with our vaginas leading up to birth? And, I can see that as a reflection of our culture. We prepare by, our mindset or using breathing, but we're not going to give birth with our minds. We're going to give birth with our vulvas, with our vaginas. And I think it's to just consider perineal massage and to consider often the talk around perineal massage is like 36 weeks, you get in there, you stretch it. And I'm always like, poor vulvas, poor vaginas. Like, why not approach this sacred rite of passage with deep reverence to our bodies, with a deep, it might be the first time in some vulva owners or women's lives that they start to actually look in the mirror at their vulva, or they start to map sensation, or they start to touch and feel. And internally, there's lots of sacrotuberous and sacrospinous ligaments that you can access that can allow more freedom of movement in the sacrum, or they can allow more freedom of movement in the pelvic floor. And the pelvic floor actually doesn't come into play in birth just as the baby's head is crowning. It comes up higher when the baby's rotating in the mid-pelvis. And there's so much focus on making women's bodies be like men's bodies, like tight vaginas, tight pelvic floor. But actually, what we need to be talking more about is how do we learn to soften into our pelvic floor? And it's not really a floor, right? It's a diaphragm. Right. How do we learn to soften into our vulvas, into our vaginas? How do we learn to connect physically with tactile, with breath, and how to soften? Because if you're going to have a vaginal birth, your vagina is a big part of that. And there's a lot you can do just with touch and breath. I think my experience, vulvas and vaginas are so responsive to reverent and respectful care and touch. And then after birth, it can be the same. It's how do we reconnect? And I found a lot of the time it's like almost holding people's hands to look in the mirror at a cesarean scar or at a vaginal scar, or working with them to start touching the area again, or working with them as they grieve if there's been transgressions or pain or things they didn't want after birth. And there's, again, I think the silence that we give birth and then we expect to just get back into lovemaking, where sometimes there's a lot of stories held in the vulva and the vagina, and we're trying to make love, and all those stories want to be shared. And sometimes as a couple, we don't have that capacity to hold that. Or it's like after birth, you need to meet yourself as virginal, as new, because you have gone through a massive transformation. And I'd love to see the bringing back of rites of passage around reclamation and re-meeting our bodies and our vulvas and our vaginas and our sexuality post-birth.
Yeah. so special to hear you say that. And how can people that are listening that might be expecting or maybe just had a baby, what are some ways they can put this into practice? How can they start? Maybe examples of a rite of passage or ways they can honor that body and bring that healing and intimacy.
I think firstly, just starting so simply and just starting with connection. So if you haven't looked at your vulva in the mirror, have a look, and even that, I know some people listening that might even put butterflies in their tummy, but just to have a look, why is your vulva any less holy or functional, or holy, any less sacred or functional than your eyes or your breasts? So firstly, have a look in the mirror and breathe as you look. What comes, what comes up for you as you start to connect with this part of your body? And you don't need to do this with a partner. This is your body. You could, but you can do it yourself. And so first would be looking, or if that feels too much, starting with touch. What's it like to touch your vulva, the outer lips, the inner lips, the internal space, the perineal space, the anus? What comes up for you as you start just gentle exploration with touch? And it might be really curious. There might be a sense of I can or I can't, or shame or joy or ickiness. And then starting with breath. So what happens when you touch and you send some slow, gentle, welcoming breaths to the area? And then noticing what happens with different sensations. And that's before or after birth. And that's really accessible, simple things to do. And I know it sounds simple, but for some people it won't feel simple.
Those are big things, I think, for a lot of people, right? So many people don't take the time to really look and honor their vulva and their vagina. Now, for some people, birth may have taken a different path. And we were just talking before, right? Some babies need that gentle cesarean birth. What about if there is any scar tissue? I know that you do a lot of work around how we can help heal on all levels, especially to prepare for lovemaking.
Yeah, and maybe I talk a little bit at the anatomy, how scar tissue can affect our anatomy, and then simple things we can do.
Sure.
Even if you've had a cesarean birth, there's some big round ligaments, and it doesn't matter if you don't know the terms, just a basic to know. There's some beautiful ligaments that go from our womb down into our vulva, the round ligaments. And when the vulva gets engorged with lovemaking, these round ligaments contract and they pull the womb forward, which lifts up the cervix in the vaginal canal, so that when you're making love, the vaginal canal is longer. So if you're putting something inside it, it doesn't bang the cervix. And sometimes pain with lovemaking can be because whatever's inside the vagina is banging your cervix. So even after cesarean birth, sometimes there can be pain with lovemaking if the scar tissue of the cesarean creates sort of stickiness or a lack of movement in the round ligaments. And then for people with vulvas, if they've had a vaginal birth, the scar tissue can be we need engorgement in the tissue. So there needs to be good blood flow in the vulva to then make lubrication. That's physiologically how lubrication happens. And so if there's scar tissue impeding blood flow, that can impede lubrication. So you can be more dry, A, because of breastfeeding hormones, or B, because you're not turned on, or C, because of their scar tissue. Or just the mechanics of the scar tissue themselves can either expose more nerve endings or deaden nerve endings or make it tender. And so either with cesarean or vaginal scars, from about 8 to 10 weeks post-birth, working with castor oil, because castor oil has some qualities that help the scar tissue break up. So working with topical application. And I'm always like, I know mamas are busy. It's even a thing like after the shower, just for 1 or 2 minutes, starting with a cesarean scar, starting with some castor oil, massage and touch and application. Because one of the things with scar tissue, it can stop mobility in the tissues. So when we invite touch and massage, that's inviting mobility into the tissue. And even if it's a vaginal birth, working with scar tissue, say a couple of minutes after a shower, that's the simplest way to start with some loving touch and some massage. And it helps the scar tissue be flexible, and it helps it to, sometimes scar tissue can get thicker and denser into surrounding tissues because the body's trying to provide support structures. So when you've let the scar initially form and then you start working with the castor oil, it stops the scar tissue getting really thick and holding up movement of organs and ligaments and tissues, or tissues in the vulva and vagina.
This is so helpful because I think so often people have discomfort or worry that they know they have scar tissue. And why are we not talking about this and helping people understand the changes in their bodies, and that it may be something that happens, but they don't have to persist with it?
Absolutely. And I've supported women who've had cesareans 15 years ago or 20 years ago, or episiotomies or tears in birth. And what can happen with scar tissue, to reference the work of Anna Crow, who's an amazing physiotherapist, often we think about prolapse and incontinence as, you know, this thing around women's bodies being too weak, or my uterus fell down, or everything's falling, and rarely do organs fall. But what can happen is that scar tissue, if it gets thicker, it can pull organs out of shape, or it can limit the organ's mobility, so bladder and womb, so there can be more incontinence. Or with cesarean scar tissue, it can affect the mobility and the movement of the bowel, so there can be things like increased constipation or increased urinary discomforts. So even if you're 10 years after birth or 15 years after birth, working internally in the vagina with scar tissue or externally with cesarean scar tissue, sometimes it's just a really simple sort of fascial release that then allows more movement of organs, so they sit in a more comfortable position and they come back, because the bladder, the uterus, the bowel, they need to move all the time. And when their mobility is limited, their function is affected. So no matter how far you are down the track after birth, working with scar tissue can really help aid comfort, prolapse, incontinence, lovemaking issues. It has a lot of impacts. And I agree, we just don't talk about it.
Yeah, we really don't. And I wasn't even thinking that far out. So it's so good to hear, because so often people think long-term after birth that they just have, they're, like you say, things are falling out or their body's not functioning well. So wonderful to hear that healing is possible at all different points. But how special for those of you that are expecting or in that postpartum period to really open to this idea and look into it. Now, I know that you do a lot of work, and we share that passion to help people to regain that intimacy and sexuality after having a baby. What other tips would you give to someone that may be either on that journey or beginning that path to really increase that love and intimacy that they so desire and deserve as they're bringing a new one into the world?
Good question. I wonder, sometimes we don't talk about as a couple what our plan for intimacy might be after the birth, and setting those expectations that it actually really might take a long time for some people to be ready for intimacy. And that's for the birth giver, but also sometimes for a partner, if they've got vicarious trauma around watching whatever happened to the woman, the birth giver's body, it might take them a little while too. And I think as a couple, having a bit of a plan to meet, it's like meeting as a virgin again. You have to start from the very beginning. And often if mothers are tired, if someone feels hassled for sex, they're just, usually the doors go down pretty quickly. So it's starting from the very beginning and like making a plan, this intimacy plan. And the plan might be the first week around connection. So that week you're just looking in each other's eyes or sharing kind words. The second week might be about really gentle touch and actually communicating how we like touch or how we don't like touch. And then the third week might be about exploring kissing, just as you would as you're starting to, well, some people don't approach their first love making like this, but just so gently, gently, because your body is new, you are different. And I imagine it could really help if someone actually starts to explore self-pleasure. And self-pleasure might be like getting into bed at night, or it might be just gently touching your face or rubbing some oil on your breasts. So exploring self-pleasure initially. And then this slow, gentle process, intimacy, touch, kissing, and then you might negotiate or navigate, how would touching the breasts feel, or how would touching the belly feel? And to do it really with awareness, with, okay, we make some time now, the baby's asleep, let's just touch my belly, I'll breathe. Because sometimes if there's been a story around the birth, when we meet this area of our body with reverence, with care, with presence, the body might want to share the story. There might be grief or rage or pain or disappointment or feelings of failure or feelings of joy. And to have that awareness as a couple, if you just go bang into lovemaking and all of those feelings aren't acknowledged, there can be a gradual shutdown or a pretty quick shutdown. So as a partner, if you're wanting to get back into making love with a woman, with a birth giver, being aware that your presence might be required, your patience, your communication, and this gentle checking in. And I appreciate for partners, they may not have made love for a week or 6 weeks or 3 months or 6 months, for partners who might be really desperate to make love, opening up the pathways of their own self-pleasure. Because if they come to the woman and they're like so ready and they so want it and they're getting so frustrated, and the woman is feeling delicate and touched out from breastfeeding, and it's just, there's a mismatch right there. So taking responsibility firstly for self-pleasuring, so then when we meet, we're not coming so hungry for each other. And then going ever so slowly, so touching the belly, and then it might be just a time when you touch the vulva and there's talk and there's breath, and then there might be internal touch. And then the next week might be, well, what's it like if we make love? And some people might need to go quickly and some people might need to go slowly, but setting the premise of going slowly and the reverence of meeting yourselves as virginal.
That is beautifully said. I like that reverence of meeting yourself as virginal. And thank you so much, Claire, for taking us through in so many tangible ways that people can communicate. And I like the idea, we do birth plans, right? But to have that intimacy plan is just so beautiful. I can just feel it in my heart. And I so wish that someone had told me this when I was pregnant, because I think I struggled a lot through that postpartum without this knowledge. So for those of you that are listening, I hope that you're really getting lots of thoughts to improve that communication and create that intimacy plan. So what else would you suggest do you have anything else you'd like to share about that process of developing intimacy after baby?
Yeah, again, I think it's really important as an individual, if you've given birth, thinking about, if you are pregnant, how are you going to meet your body after this experience? Because for some people after birth, the way their body feels, like their breast dripping, or the shape of their breasts, or if they've got stretch marks on their belly, or perhaps they're holding more weight, how can you find ways to lovingly and compassionately embrace your body. And then the other thing I think we don't consider well, in our culture, we really separate sexuality and motherhood. Like there's such taboo around the erotic mother. And I don't know, for me, I found mothering incredibly erotic, to feel so full and so dripping of milk and so fecund, so life-giving. And yet I know, particularly if people come from a religious background, particularly, there might be a lot of taboo around lovemaking as a mother, and how can I be a sexual being when I'm a mother? So looking at what our beliefs are, or even as we might map our bodies, starting to map, what are my beliefs around sexuality and motherhood, or pleasure and motherhood, or what I deserve as a mother, or my relationship as my body as a mother. Does my body belong to my baby? Or through the act of self-pleasure, can I reclaim my body as my body belongs to me, that I gift in service to my baby, which is two different, it's a subtle change, but a different change. So exploring those two things, how we're going to compassionately embrace our post-birth bodies, particularly if they feel broken, some people do, and how do we make that connection between erotic motherhood? How do we explore the taboo of erotic motherhood? Because there's a lot of power in that as well.
A lot of power. And I share with you that too. So I know that people that are listening are probably saying, oh, Claire, how can we find you? Where can you share kind of, I know you have a few courses that are available and websites and social media.
Thank you. So my website is www.claireecclestonmidwife.com. And I have an online school. It's like a school called Womb Rhythms. So if you Google Womb Rhythms Teachable, and that's got my online courses that you can take at any time. And then in 2023, I'll do them as closed containers. So we'll journey together on Zoom. And I just did a beautiful one with some post-birth mamas, where we work together looking in our vulva, at our vulva. You know, they can turn their camera off, so it's very private, touching the vulva, exploring pleasure. And Home Sweet Home Birth is on there. And I'll have one called Lovemaking After Birth, which is coming. And then on Instagram, I'm at Claire Home Birth. And I have lots of little educational reels that I do. And on Facebook, I'm Claire Eccleston.
Thank you so much, Claire. It is truly an honor and pleasure to spend this time with you. And I know that I took so many nuggets away. And for all of you that are listening, we'd love to have you share, put on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you are on social. What was your nugget that you're going to take forward into your birth or to your postpartum, and tag us? We always love hearing from you. So thank you so much, Claire. Truly a pleasure. And for everyone listening, I look forward to you joining us for our next episode of the Orgasmic Birth Podcast.